Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Audio check. Can I get some feedback in chat? Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's get our screen share started. All right. I already did the we will begin momentarily in chat, everybody. So you don't need to please hold your questions for designated time because today is mostly lab time. Completely casual, like all the time. Around the end, or when I stop getting questions, I'll stop recording and I will start another Zoom meeting to do one-on-one meetings with people privately with the Zoom waiting room functionality so that I can take each of you privately. A lot of you had given feedback that you liked that better or felt it helpful to be able to get one-on-one time with me. And so we'll spend a little bit of time doing that. No additional labs are reading yet, but lab 4 is in the hopper. I'm about to throw it over the fence to Obana to check it out before we unleash it on all of you. But the errata for lab 1, version 4, and for lab 2, version 3 have both been posted with some of the things I described in lecture last time. I don't think there were any surprises since then. And on Wednesday, we're going to continue with the lecture about the boot process and some other stuff. I owed you guys an explanation for why Catman didn't work on CentOS during lecture a week ago tonight. And it turned out, it's funny, it's kind of a send up on troubleshooting in general. I looked at the man page with you all in presence. I completely scratched my head, decided to punt it. And when I looked at it later, the solution was obvious. I just ran Catman with no options. And it was pretty cool, actually. It went through this long display, not at all like what BSD Catman, which I'm very used to, would just do nothing. And it would it used to go grind your hard disk. Now you don't hear it because it's an SSD. It would just go away and it would go through all of these text files and make the one-line synopses of all the manual pages. Typically, this is another program that you want to run as a cron tab because you install programs in their man pages all the time, but do they become a part of searching the database that helps you search the man pages? No, they don't automatically. So on some OSs, you rebuild them again, as I'm saying, with a periodic process. But Catman, unlike BSD, Catman on Linux, it told you what it was doing and gave you full-on progress indicator. Could I upload the last lecture? Did I fail to upload the last lecture? If I did, I'm sorry. That was completely an oversight, and I can definitely fix that tonight. Simeng, Mr. Chang, feel free to come back and chat since I'm not lecturing tonight. I don't at all mind answering stuff in chat. Quite the contrary. I'm here for it tonight. And any questions, again, that you want to ask, and if you don't mind sharing your screen in front of everybody and you don't mind being heard in front of everybody, you are welcome to raise your hands now and ask questions about everything. I'm going to take a note right now for Peter to upload the 722 lecture in all caps. So as I review this, not that I can miss it in such a short set of notes, but I won't this way for sure. But does anybody have any questions? Because because that's what we're here for. I mean, pretty much it's lab time. I also won't hesitate to just sit here and be here, and I may mute myself while I'm not talking, but I'll stay here until hands get raised, and I'll check for hands, because that would be what we would do last year in class. Obata could tell you is we would all just show up at the room, and what was it, that funky room that I got there? What's that building called? Smith West? I don't hear you if you're saying anything. You are not. West, I think. It's SHW12. Oh, ha. I'm glad you could hear me, but I was muted. The problem was me. Sorry, Obata, you were saying?
Storm Hall West.
Storm Hall West.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, those were neat rooms. Very vertical. You were right on top of the person who sat in front of you, but at least there was power at every desk, right? And we would just show up and everybody would just have lab time there. And sometimes I'd be working on my own work too, but it was just time so that I was there if you wanted me. Mr. Beveridge, you're the first contestant on The Price is Right.
Hey, Peter, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Loud and
okay. So quick question. Last week during lecture, you mentioned the MX record issue with being able to have mail be sent from the OpenBSD versus the FreeBSD VM. I just want to make sure that's part of the Lab 1 and Lab 2 revisions that you're going to be releasing, right?
It's already done.
Oh, okay.
And it is there in lab number 2. I didn't cover it in lab number 1 because we did all the mail setup in lab number 2. I felt so it made sense to make that change and correction right there, since people weren't running into it until lab 2, if that makes sense.
Okay, perfect.
Where I can avoid sending you back all the way back to lab 1 to fix something, I'm going to do it. Especially where, you know, if I did it in lab 1, I would probably end up on the side of doing it as a change to the original material, as opposed to telling you how to edit a service that is running in process. Although I did add some notes to lab number 1 about restarting services for people who are still having issues with named. And remember, again, all of those configuration files that you have for a server, for a service, there are very few pieces of software that are going to sit there watching that file for changes and just automatically do something based upon a change to a file. You have to tell them to restart, to reparse their configuration files, and to reread any changes to their backend databases. DNS, what you're doing with DNS precisely is a database. So I noted again, and I'm going to go ahead and remind you here on the recording. We will record this first part of the lecture, not the later one-on-ones, but remind you that you need to update the serial number in your DNS file. Because when they replicate, those serial numbers are how they know when they have to clone new data. And yeah, so take a look at lab number 1 and about restarting service. And I would prefer to do that in lab 2. And did I answer your question, Mr. Beveridge?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Awesome. Very welcome, sir. I saw some hands up, but they went away. Where did you go? I thought I saw Momo. I'm hoping it's because I answered your questions. But again, if nobody has any, I'm probably just going to mute until I see a hand raised and get to work myself. Okay. Good job, Momo. Found it by web searching. Mr. Espinosa, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. I emailed you earlier today about the no space left on disk, and I've found a few things online, but none of them seem to be working. I'm still not really sure where to go because I've checked my inodes, I've checked my file systems, and they all say everything's good and free. Um, I've checked that maybe a process is taking all the memory, but I don't have a list of open files command like the lsof. So I'm not sure how to check that. I've been trying different methods, but it hasn't been working.
So I could swear I replied to you.
Yeah, you replied you replied to my first email. Maybe you replied to the second. No, you replied to my first email telling me to use like the du commands, and I did them all. I checked all the file systems and my inodes, and it says they're all good. I don't know how in depth I needed to go with that command.
It's not a matter of how in depth you need to go. I aimed you at that tool because it's the best way of finding out where all your disk space is consumed.
Yeah.
And that, sir, is what you want to discover is the root cause of the problem, no?
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep looking through then.
So using that tool to determine what folder is filling up on your file system and by what process, ownership information should tip you off there. The location does not, but that is what you want to know.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you. I'll keep looking.
All right. So again, there's not going to be any lecture tonight, everybody. If you do not have to be here if you do not want to be. This is just lab time, but I'm going to be here. I'm committed to being here, and I'm here to help you if you want. If it's really slow, we'll go into one-on-one lab time here pretty soon. And when I do, for the record, I will post, I'll put this here too, that Peter will post link to new Zoom for waiting rooms, one-on-ones, when we go over there. How many total labs are there? Well, we're still in the process of cooking them, Mr. Aziz. So I'm guessing around 9. It's funny, you can probably see on my screen here that I've got a labs folder, and right now you can see there's 5 through 6 and 7 and 8. We haven't cooked yet, but I know that I'm cooking one in addition to the materials that there were last year. And Obata is cooking one too. I'm doing ESXi, so I'm doing a private cloud lab to also show you backups and to do a physical to virtual conversion again if you missed it. And Obata is working on Amazon Web Services. It's also worth noting and giving you an answer that as it stands, Lab 9 is actually a short one, kind of like Lab 0. And in Lab 9, you're given all the directions for grading yourself. So once I drop Lab 9 is when until the grading deadline, you get to do self-service grading. Again, as often as you want, as many times as you want, you get the idea. You just get to run the script over and over again on all of your VMs. It's also worth noting that you can see there are Lab 5 is going to be broken into a 5A and a 5B because there are 2 different operating systems there. This is Solaris, so Oracle's Unix, formerly Sun, and AIX, IBM's Unix. But they're probably going to be 10 or 11 altogether if you count 0 and 9. But again, 0 and 9 were relatively short. Let's see, Mr. Jeffrey Ollis, you are invited to unmute, sir.
Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to comment on whoever had that question earlier. I had actually run into that issue, the no space left on device, when the OpenBSD was trying to do the port update. I dug into it a little bit further, and it looks like you get that no space left on device, and it's actually not talking about your machine itself. It's talking about how much space is left on the server, depending on how many people are accessing it. So I looked at the server we were using, and it happens to be one located in Canada. And there are a couple others that are located on the West Coast that you can access. But that's where I stopped, because when I try to access one that was in Oregon, it read through that ports list and it was saying, oh, this file already exists. So I'll have to go through and try to remove all the ports in order to start using that server to do that cron command that we had in there, the change the user ports, and then do the CVS queue up PD or OpenBSD67.
Yep. If you change source repos, you will have to blow away and restore your ports tree. But it sounds like you're talking about two different errors here. One that sounded like it was server side. If he's I think it was Jeremy was getting no space left on device, and that is definitely a local error because the file system is filling up.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't know if they were experiencing the same thing that I was, because I tried it actually a couple times after I got that email back from Root trying to perform it at midnight and try to do it by hand, and I also was able to replicate getting that error back from the server when I was typing it in. But then I used a different one and it was fine, or I just waited 30 minutes and it was fine running on that same server.
Yeah, I'd love a screenshot from you if you're able to replicate the problem.
Okay, sounds good.
Sometimes there are fringe cases that happen in the labs that I steer you all a certain way with my walkthrough part, and a few of you fall off or make a mistake, end up in the same tar pit, as often happens, and I do like to know what those are. Do you want to hear about them? But yeah, thank you, sir. Did you have anything else, Mr. Hollis? You already muted yourself.
Nope, I'm good. That was it.
All right, great. Thank you, sir. Again, everybody, you are free. You don't have to be here. Let's see. I see Mr. Nelson's question in chat. I'm catching up on Lab 3 and skim chapters 1 to 5. Is there a quiz or anything? No, you missed no quiz. We do no quizzes, sir. The lab material is enough. It is the meat. There is one final exam. It is open book. It is multiple choice. It is online. And you're going to have a ridiculously long amount of time to complete it, because I just generally try to make it to be an exercise in showing you that you can find information online. Is the final going to be related to the labs? Yeah, I think you can count on at least a few questions related to the labs for sure. Some of it's going to be related to Unix in general and Unix concepts in general, of course. But yeah, we'll definitely be pulling from the labs for questions. Brandon, I see your message and I look forward to your screenshot, sir. And Neil Bissonette, I see your raised hand, sir. You may unmute.
I'm here. Sorry. I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
So I remember what you said on Wednesday about basically it's kind of like step 26, 7, and 8 kind of be together. But when we're talking about, can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you.
I'm kind of talking about the using IMAP and SMTP. So I'm going to go back through the notes he did. So objectively, or the goal is to set up our mail client on our computer. And I'm just going to use regular mail on my computer. Set up the IMTP, which should be, if I'm going to say imtp.openfree.cslocal. or CS470.local, and then the SMTP is SMT dot, or sorry, IMAP is free, and then SMPT is open, right? Is that, are we doing it the same way?
SMTP is outbound mail, and like I've explained in the lecture, we're not going to be sending outbound mail from this email address.
From the client, from our client on their physical computer.
Correct. So you do
Okay,
not,
so what do we put in there?
you don't need to put anything in there.
Okay, so then the IMAP is IMAP dot free BSD dot CS or CS470 dot local, or is it just CS470 dot local?
It's just the host name, FreeBSD CS470 local, like I say in there. The host name of your mail server, as you've set it up in DNS.
Which is FreeBSD dot CS470 dot local. Okay.
You got it, man.
So normally, the reason I was asking is because I set up a lot of IMAP. So normally you have to put the words in there. And I was just, that was why I was getting a little confused on why, in this case, why we didn't. I guess it's because how we set it up in our host table, right?
You said you had to put words in there? Did I
No,
hear?
normally when you set up a client on your computer or your phone or whatever, you set up the IMAP incoming server. And you use the word IMAP or POP, typically, right?
Hold on. Ordinarily, you're right. You do use an outbound server. We're only using the inbound functionality here. With respect to your mail client, to getting email, you're only getting email inbound on this system. We're not setting it up to send to anywhere. The only place you would be able to send to would be other users of your little .local domain, because nobody knows about your .local domain, and everybody, if it went outside on the internet, if we tried to send it outbound, everybody would throw it away as spam.
Yeah, that's true. I get that.
So ordinarily, you're right. You do always set up outbound, because why would you ever set up an email account that you don't want to send email from?
Unless it's no reply, one of those type of things.
Right. So we're in one of those rare fringe cases where it's actually called from. We're monitoring a private network of servers. There are no actual email users, but we've set up an email server so that we can get email from diagnostic jobs running on our systems. And that's it. We're just reading email.
Okay. But on so how I've set up my Outlook to receive my Cox and my Maricosta and before SDSU SWIP, there was an inbound IMAP. And on my phone, there's an inbound, but you use the word imap.cox.sdsu.whatever, right? But in this case, we're not using the IMAP. We're just using the words freebsd.cs470.local.
What I'm trying to get you to, Neil, is understanding that the server name that you supply in there is a DNS host name. And if the word IMAP occurs in Google or Cox or SDSU's email server, it's because they named that computer IMAP in DNS.
Right. That's what I say. That's what I thought. Okay. So I just thought for something we did when we were setting up IMAP, maybe I have to look at it again. I thought we set up IMAP specifically on our server, but we didn't call it IMAP dot. Okay, got it. I understand now.
Set up an IMAP service, and you can name a computer. It's the namespace. Again, you can name it anything you want. You can name your mail server Fred if you want. Right. And so long as Fred resolves and your email program is able to speak to a mail server, it couldn't care less what its name is because that piece of data is, again, just to do the DNS lookup that, again, you set up the service for that too. And lab number 1,
right,
sd.cs470.local, that's how again, we set them up as host entries at the end of lab 2, so we don't need to flip our resolver configuration around on our hosts and break our internet all the time. But
right,
a mail client on a VM on that network would use your OpenBSD name service to find your mail server at the right IP address.
So right now the cron jobs that we have running at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning should go to our username email address, and that we should be able to access both on our open, free, both on the open, the free, and our mail client.
That's correct.
Okay. So, all right.
We make a point of forwarding the mail from root. So if
Yeah,
you
right.
run something in cron, no matter who
Right.
that user is, they get a mail
Yeah.
from cron deep if there's any output.
Okay.
We are forwarding root's email as we customarily do to the
Right.
actual mortal usernames of the system administrators. In this case, you.
Right.
Makes
Okay.
sense?
All right. Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Makes sense.
All right. Thank you, Neil. I'm lowering your hand. I've got no other raised hands, so I'm tuning back into chat. And yes, I'm getting email in the mail app for the last step in lab 2 from both VMs. Same errors when doing lab 3 and go screenshots of the error messages. Brandon Castor, you're missing a word, or a word is off somewhere there in what you're saying. Using Windows, yes. The host operating system should not matter. Windows is just being used as a hypervisor here. Windows is nowhere in between your FreeBSD and OpenBSD VMs at this point in time, or your CentOS one. It is invisibly there below the CPU and the technology stack as this all works now. But it is nowhere in the conversation in between. And yes, Mr. Lee, I see your message. And for the errata note, you are supposed to add an MX on OpenBSD to aim mail for OpenBSD to the FreeBSD host. That is exactly what I'm asking you to do if you are experiencing this behavior. The behavior that I described prior to that. You see the OpenBSD system trying to talk to local. We discussed this in a prior lecture. If it looks like it's trying to talk to itself to deliver email, we get around that by telling DNS that email for OpenBSD is supposed to go to FreeBSD. Oh, you were redoing the same one. And you were the one who had the installer crashing, right, Brandon? Yeah, but didn't you? Okay, so Brandon, I'm going to tell you flat out, your problem is that you weren't creating a custom VM because you were getting that auto installer help image, and you only do that when you tell the VMware that you want to install CentOS. So the easy way, and it tries to help you, and it breaks the CentOS installer. That was not already a part of Lab 1, Step 40, Mr. Lee. There is no MX record for the OpenBSD system. There is only an MX record for the entire domain. Oh, I got hands up. Awesome. Martin Phillip.
Hello. So I keep getting the network error and destination MXs. Are
you able to paste it into chat?
Yeah.
Please, that would be helpful for everybody to see. I'll put it here in the notes.
So I'll post the whole thing. Oh. So start from
delivery. So check this out. So again, this will come naturally to you with time, but clearly this is a timestamp. This is the affected host name. This is the process that was running, the process ID. This is probably some internal handle. Again, everything after the colon. This header, like the header of a packet, comes from the system logging service. Everything that follows comes from the logging process, in this case, SMTPD. So it's saying mail, transfer agent, delivery, the envelope ID, I bet that is. So this is the identity of the message, or a handle for the message. To root at OpenBSD, recipient equal the same source. It's trying to send relay here. It's saying, hey, it looks like I need to send this email out to the network, but my relay is openbsd.cs470.local, which is, in this case, the same system. So it's going out, looking itself up over DNS and trying to send an email to it as if it was the mail server. So what I do in the lab 2 errata that I just posted is have you short circuit that by explicitly setting who the mail receiver is for the OpenBSD VM and aiming that to our mail server. So it lands in your inbox where you're going to get it with your email client.
Okay.
Make sense?
Sounds good. Thank you.
But yeah, I want you to get in the habit of reading this. You have this golden log file right in front of you. And if you take the time to dissect it, more often than not, it is going to tell you precisely what is wrong.
Yeah, I actually formatted my computer with Windows and I restored the virtual stuff. That the log stuff helped me a lot with trying to restore everything to what it was supposed to be. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, when coders do logging well, oh, bloody hallelujah and thank you, because they make everyone's job easier. Again, you just have to put forth the effort to read what is put in front of you. Mr. Hollis, you're the next batter.
Hey, Peter. I just had a question about how the grading system works. So is it checking the configuration of each server to be like how you outlined it in each lab? Or if I start playing with things and changing a couple of the configurations, am I going to get penalized for that?
So yes, and I don't know for the short versions of the answer, because I'm going to give you a better answer and it may take a while. Yes, I can't grade you on anything else besides how I've asked you to set up the system. So it's not just going to be on the way they're configured, of course. It's going to be that they're working as well. And I'm going to be able to take evidence from all the systems to validate that they are working. So if you mess with them, if you tinker around with them, if you're doing something new that has nothing to do with what I asked you to set up, you're probably okay. Because again, I'm just going to be checking that you set things up as I asked. If you want to experiment and you're already done with the labs, needless to say, there's a bell curve. There's always a bell curve. The bell curve is just a fact of life. And there are going to be a few of you who just get this, just soak it up, and they're just going to be done with the labs within a couple hours after I get each one of them out. And I wish I had enough material to keep throwing at you people, because I'd be happy to aim you in as many to as many places as you could go. But I'm going to encourage you to experiment. If you want to be perfectly safe, Mr. Hollis, I'd just spin up another VM.
That's a good point.
That's part of the whole point of dragging you in front of this stuff, is that, well, not only are they vital job skills and perfectly appropriate for this class and the class material, but the point in doing it this way is to show you how you have your lab in your own hand. with virtualization. You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want with your network inside VMware. If you have those, the systems that I ask you to set up in the labs on the IPs that I ask you to put them on, working as they do, you can set up as many more as you want. And go nuts. And don't hesitate to ask me questions about, you know, where should I go next? Or what are you interested in? I love those sorts of questions. I just bristle at the ones where you show me you haven't read the lab or want me to read the lab for you, or that you don't want to search the web before you ask somebody something. And that's clearly not you, Mr. Hollis. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
By all means. Do you have a fan or something next to your computer, Obata?
Oh, yes, I do. Sorry, I forgot about that.
Look it up there. It's still making the noise though. It wasn't your fan.
Well, that would probably be my
It's
best
funny,
one.
you know the sleeve stacks from the original Land of the Lost, the live action Land of the Lost from like the 1960s and 70s? Have you ever seen that show?
No.
No? So if I said slee stacks to you, you have no idea what I'm talking about.
No idea.
Probably only me and Neil Bissonette have an idea what the bloody slee stacks were. I don't know if we have any other students. It was an amazingly good show for the 1970s, but I've got the sound going on and you and I are the only ones. And I can see that you've got something triggering your mic and showing some input levels on your mic. And it sounds like the slee stacks from that show in the 60s and 70s. They just kind of went.
It would probably be this.
What's that?
Computer right here.
Oh,
Probably this computer right here.
I'm glad somebody finds it funny. You're all like, Paul. What's Paul's last name? Who's Paul? Oh, Paul Vetri. Okay, yeah, I forgot there are more people in here who know what the Land of the Lost is. Yeah, I was totally having flashbacks to slee stacks. And oddly enough, they're the one intelligent English-speaking member of their species was named Enoch. It's not quite Unix, but it's close, right? It was Enoch. I recommend you look it up. The slee stacks were funny. Land of the Lost slee stack, 1974 pics. Now can I get an audio track? I hate going to YouTube. I don't want Google to be able to monetize and track my curiosity here. Mr. Aziz, I'm looking back in, excuse me, back at your question here in chat. I know nothing about the cybersecurity boot camp that's offered at SDSU. And if there is I'm kind of curious how I had no idea that there was a cybersecurity boot camp offered at SDSU. Because pretty much, well, I don't want to say I'm the guy. Homeland Security definitely has, and why do they have a degree program in Homeland Security? I'm still scratching my chin at that. They're cool guys though, and they do have a bunch of security guys, as does the MIS department. I would love to see a link to what you've got, Mr. Aziz, not only because I would like to know them, but yeah, I'd be happy to render an opinion on it. Pocky, there is no benchmark. How do you feel with the material? You know whether or not you're putting enough effort in on them. At this point, you should hopefully be past lab 1. But if it's anything like last semester, lots of people did just fine with respect to their final grade in the class and didn't finish lab 1 until really late and then sprinted through the last of the virtual machines. Because yeah, again, OpenBSD is way easier this year than it was last year. But yeah, like Mr. Ware just said, once you're done with OpenBSD, everything really looks like a piece of cake. OpenBSD is not creature comfortable. I don't know that lab 1 is considered the longest of all the labs. The one that I do that has backup and restore may actually end up being a little longer for some people. I haven't done it myself yet, but I will soon. But yeah, lab 1 is definitely the hardest because once you've done the first lab, you have some grasp with fundamentals and you've done something and you've gotten past troubleshooting a few things and you feel a little shot of adrenaline and confidence. I know I can project that into you all, even though I learned less comfortable Unix at first. But yeah, once you get over the first pain, everything else feels a little easier. But again, there is no benchmark. But yeah, I would definitely prefer to be done with lab 1 at this point. Anybody else? There we go. Wave files. Eerie time passing effect. Grumpy doing this thing. Nick. I just want Sleestack hissing. I still see nobody with their hands raised. Yeah, don't worry, Pocky. You'll do just fine. A lot of people really dragged on OpenBSD and kept banging their heads against the wall. But once you get over that one, the rest are really kind of a piece of cake because even though you're still in a terminal window, they try to give you more creature comforts and they're more modern and they're more fully featured. OpenBSD is vital. OpenBSD is actively used, but one of its goals is not to be a comfortable, user-friendly operating system, which is precisely why I threw it at you in the last class first. When I first asked Obata for feedback, looking back on last year for what he liked and didn't like, the last year, again, I didn't have a TA. I composed what of the class happened completely in a vacuum, burning the midnight oil. And I went, I'm going to throw the hardest crap at them first so that I can see them, so I can see the light bulbs go off over their heads and see their eyes get all big and watch them get confident and feel it so that I can keep pushing them and fanning them on, and hopefully by the end of 6 weeks, I'm just sitting in the front of the room with my pom-poms cheering you on as you set up your VMs, y'all. But I wanted you to give you the most pain first so you could see that it really wasn't that hard. Once you get over the pain of any initial learning curve, you hit pay dirt. which again is why I also totally encourage. I developed this obstinance. Again, I do want to talk with you all. It's not that I'm trying to be unapproachable. I'm definitely not trying to make you fear me. And some of you may hate it now that I'm snarky and obstinate when you ask me silly questions, or effectively to read the lab materials for you, but you will love me for it later, I promise you. You can find the answer to everything. Once upon a time, I fell in love with my first piece of Sun hardware, and I taught myself all of this crap, aside from what I got in the class in 1995 or 1996 from Dr. Carroll. Because, yeah, it taught me how to do a lot of these things that I'm teaching you now. We did NFS file shares. We stood up basic DNS, although not a full name server. I packed way more into the class than he did by making everything a server. Yeah, I did get my own Spark station. I was the only kid on my block at that time in the CS department that had a Sun at home. Part of that was because, like a good pupil of Dr. Carroll, I refused to own anything with an Intel CPU or Windows on the hard disk. But I had a Mac and a Sun, and I tried to make that Mac as Unix-like as possible. In fact, I did. I mean, literally, Unix was on everything. When I say it was literally everywhere and ported everywhere, I mean it. So long as nobody's raising their hand, I'll show you a little piece of computing history. Yeah, I can add page numbers. Neil, would you do me a favor and send me an email, please, so that I have that in my, well, what am I saying? Never mind that. Add page numbers. To labs. You will be, yeah, sure thing, man. You will be pleased to know that it was last year, I believe I had, you know, there are multiple parts. I divide each lab into parts, and each part would start off with its own number 1 last year. And I killed that this year. So there's only one set of numbers for the items in each lab, you may notice. You can edit the PDF in Word and add in the header. You can open PDFs in Word. That's news to me. Let's hear the questions, and I'm still only on lab 1. And Greg, that's fine. Greg Dressing, how do you feel like you're doing on lab 1? I'm kind of curious to hear. Greg is already on the job as a sysadmin for the cyber defense team. Feeling quite lazy, if I'm being honest. I'm all for you being honest, and there's no wrong answer to that question. Too much baseball. There's never enough baseball, homie. And those Marlins, oh my God. Those Marlins might have just effed it all up. $7X works for me. Once lab 1 is finished, might be a scam. Okay, I covered all the questions. I saw some props to Jesus too. Jesus worked like a charm. Don't mount the ISO file while creating the VM added during the hardware customization part. Yeah, don't even add it during the hardware customization part. Just install off the ISO. VMware's desktop products often try to do all of this fancy crap to try to help you get it up sooner, easier, and better than mod the installer. And if you allow it to do that to either CentOS or Ubuntu, my experience is nothing but pain. Always only insert the operating system media if you can help it. What VMware does really well is just emulating a plain piece of PC hardware so that if you do nothing different, it should work. I mean, you don't even need the guest editions. You'll see them called VMware tools. in all the VMware suites, and those are the drivers for the specific pieces of hardware that VMware emulates. But pretty much every operating system, and I do mean every operating system, because you can run 30-plus-year-old OSs in VMware. I do. I have a little museum here in my Mac. But it does such high fidelity emulation of standard hardware largely that you don't even need VMware's own drivers. So that is why I suggest that you make each VM as a custom VM so that VMware in trying to help you doesn't sabotage you. Fix. I'm glad you think this class is not that bad, Martin. I don't really think so either, but for people who are completely new to Unix or for whom these sorts of operating system concepts are completely foreign, some people have a really hard time with OpenBSD, and I totally get it. If you get DNS lookup temp fail in your log file, what could be wrong? Didn't I go through, and so temp fail sounds like a mail error, right, Mr. Aziz? It probably means DNS isn't working, either your configuration or the server for the use you're intending. So for those of you dinosaurs out there like me, since there are no hands raised, and I was talking about using Macs like Unix as much as possible, because I was a Unix guy with a Mac way back when, and PC Unix wasn't a thing yet. Linux wasn't a thing, really. I was, what do I want to do here? I'm going to do another terminal window to house this, because this is QEMU. Same emulator I used to run that Sun last time. And QEMU emulates a bunch of different pieces of hardware. Oh, I'm hoping this has the right OS loaded in it right now. Yes, that is classic Mac OS. For those of you who haven't seen it before, this is what the Macintosh looked like before it was Unix. And it was funny, it was widely regarded as a toy operating system way back when. When I started going to DEF CON, you used to get laughed at for bringing a Mac to DEF CON. But once it became Unix, it wasn't so much the case anymore. But I always used my Mac for pen testing, and because I was a Unix guy at home on a command line, I had to make my Mac more Unix-like. And this app here, Mach 10, you will see really rapidly looks a little bit like OpenBSD starting up, because again, this is a BSD Unix running on top of a Mach kernel as an application on the Mac. And this isn't 68K, this is PowerPC, Steve. But you log in and this is an app on your Mac, but it can access your native Mac file systems. So old that it didn't have the human readable option. Didn't even have -K. But did it have uname? Yeah, PowerPC. And here's Unix on the Mac running natively. Excuse me, not running natively, running as an app. This is the kernel as an application on top of another OS. And this is something that we did historically on a lot of operating systems where we wanted a Unixy environment. Go ahead and shut that down. Thank you, Mr. Aziz. I see your link, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it up and give you some instant feedback. Who is this? Aiden Brown and Greg D. Are any of the other CDT guys in here? Who is this? This has to be the Homeland Security Department. How do I hack you? Interesting. Awesome. About us. Yeah, I wonder why we in the club had no idea about it, but I sure do know about it now. And I'm going to find out. They reference certifications there, Mr. Aziz. I mean, there's little in the way of substantive material about it. The 15 grand? Wow. I see a business opportunity here. Where was that thing? There was a list of the topics and it said like cloud security, Microsoft security. And that looked like it was pretty comprehensive from a 10,000 foot view, but it was a 10,000 foot view. Here you go. There was that list. AWS, Linux, I don't know what LPI essentials are. Cisco, so you'd learn how to configure routers and firewalls and security devices, network backbone gear. CompTIA, these are a bunch of memorization style multiple choice exams, as is the ISC squareds exams. They also have the CISSP certification, ISC squared here. And these aren't worth the paper they're printed on, because you can memorize, anybody can memorize anything. It doesn't mean that they know how to do anything with it. I don't hire people who have this crap. Or at least, let me hit a revision. It's not that I don't hire people that have those. It's that if it's there on their resume, it doesn't mean it. I'm not going to sneeze at them because they went through the certification. Somebody might have very well have asked them to do it, but the CompTIA and ISC squared just means that you know how to cram for an exam, memorize buzzwords and their basic meanings. It doesn't mean that you get how to do anything. I've not been exposed to the AWS practitioner materials or Linux LPI. Cisco's certifications fairly generally actually do know that you mean how to do something. When somebody's a CCIE, for instance, a Cisco certified, I think it's an internet working engineer, pretty generally, yeah, I know it's not the CISSP there, but that's, the CISSP is definitely what they're better known for. Somebody who has a CCIE pretty generally always knows what they're talking about, because getting into CCIE is way more like, it's kind of the bastard child of a IT trial by fire and being hazed and a puzzle game show, because when you're going to become a CISSP, a bunch of CISSPs have to determine that you have the chops. And generally they will get you together and They will meet you face to face in the days before coronavirus. They will show you a rack of computing equipment and generally how it works verbally and tell you how it works. And then they will dismiss you, and overnight they will break it, and you will have to come back and fix it and figure out what is in there and work and troubleshoot it. SDSU does offer classes on encryption, Mr. Castor. As I talk about in my security class, encryption is really magic math, and it belongs in the mathematics department. And that is where it is. It is now a 600 series class for for grads and up in the math department, because it's math. It's a math discipline. The guy you want to look for is Carmelo Interlando in the math department. I have only met him via email. And I see Obata echoed that same thing. Yeah. It's neat stuff. It's funny. The security class that I now teach, when I took it as a student, it was, we did RSA encryption by hand with the shortcuts because it's all modular math. You're always trimming off the remainder when you're doing RSA. The remainder is the interesting intermediate product that you tend to keep more often than not. And we were doing it during exams. It wasn't really a computer security class. It was a theory of hiding information class in the 1990s. Absolutely, I would recommend that you start learning about encryption like book-wise. But you know, even if you do computing security, as I describe it in the security class, it's a tool in your belt. It helps you to know how it works this deep. Because if you really, really want to be good at it, it's a life-consuming thing, and mostly it's math PhDs that do it, that examine the algorithms, that do proofs of their security or the level of their security. You should know generally what to use and generally how they work, but you don't need to know them in depth. You will use them to implement stuff. It will help you to know how they work, but you will never write an encryption algorithm. Does that make sense? You should never write an encryption algorithm and use it to protect anything you care about. Generally, good cryptography, a good cryptographic algorithm endures the scrutiny of an army of PhDs for like 10 years and sits on the shelf being scrutinized before it's ever used to actually protect any data in production, because you want to let the algorithm sit on the shelf and undergo the review before you put any arm any data or protect any data with it. So it's a lot of math proofs. It's good to know generally how they work, and encryption is neat. I would absolutely recommend it. It's funny, I mean, me personally, if you remember my slide deck, my short one from the first day, I mean, before I was pen testing systems at my first job out of college, they had me doing key infrastructures because that was what the government needed at the time. That was the contract that they had. I used that funding to start up a pen testing team, an ethical hacking team. And to this day, still, I keep using encryption over and over again, whether I'm testing products. I've black boxed a couple of commercial encryption products to try to get around them. I've done some work on fortifying encryption APIs, and right now one of my biggest roles is in an encryption company. where I'm the director of development. Yes, well said, Steve. Crypto is like an automatic transmission. You input, the magic happens, and you get output, but don't try to fix one. Yeah, it's the work for a PhD in math. What's a good skill to develop for cybersecurity? Well, a good question, Brandon. It should be telling to you that it's been my personal crusade for many years to make this class the prerequisite for my security class. Because if you took my security class before the CS department was offering 470 again, we spent the first few weeks giving you a rapid immersion into Unix, because all the good offensive tools all are in Unix. And if you want to know how to secure something or how to break the security in something, you need to know how, have some serious hands-on experience in how operating systems work. And like I said, we have pretty much a 3 major OS world right now. You're playing with some of the fringe OSs for sure, because we're talking about Unix in general here, but there's Windows and then there's a bunch of Unix-alike and POSIX. And everything that isn't Windows pretty much nowadays it's Unix. So if you want to lock something down that's not Windows, you need to know how to use this stuff. So it's all the things that are important for cybersecurity. Good cybersecurity people, they're, God, it's tough to generalize. There's so many fields of expertise that you can go into in security. And in that security class, I really just kind of try to go like this deep, enough to whet your appetite and make sure that you understand the important concepts. Well, I do you the service of showing you all the doors that you could walk through in the course of a career. And mine was, again, it's before I went into, so I chose SDSU as a student for this class because I saw it in the catalog in 1994 and 1995 when I was looking at the school from afar, and because of the security class. And the security class at that time, nothing on Dr. Beck, he didn't do a bad job teaching it, but it wasn't much about computer security. Like I said, it was all encryption. But this class here, this one, CS470, was the most important in my academic career because it gave me, along with my job experience, the underpinning in networking and security configuration and operating system configuration that I needed to build a team of ethical hackers. You need all this stuff. You need network chops. You need to understand code. You need to understand operating systems and operating system security design. And you need to be cozy on a POSIX command line. Otherwise, you're a Windows point and click person or a Mac user. You're not a computer scientist. Sure, some like their Windows, but most of us computer scientists, we live in Unix. I'm looking for questions. Encryption. I'm glad you listened too, Brandon. I hope to be a good use of all of your summers. Multiple hiring. Yeah, solid understanding of networking. The network is everything. Then Sun nailed it with their marketing slogan way back when. The network is the computer. That is the premise of the cloud. It's, again, what we mean by cloud is hosted virtualization, that you're subletting CPU and RAM and disk on somebody else's computer, just like you're subletting them from your host operating system and your physical hardware to all of these subscribing tenant virtual machines on your computer. This is what we do to host services nowadays. And whether you're standing up the communications infrastructure for a company, big or small, or you're developing an integrated piece of software for a mobile phone, the network is a component now far more often than not, as the rule rather than the exception. So that's why there is a piece of it. I've read Dan Miesler's stuff before. He does some good short articles. Thanks for the link, Steve. 2019 updates. You can see it's not too long, but it's very informative. And if you see the link that Steve Schwartz just posted, go grab it. I'm going to go grab another drink and I'll be right back. All right, anybody got any questions? Anybody want to see more old operating systems? That'll make you go, whoa. Got one last one. Hit me, Brandon. Yes, Steve Henke, that is Pink Floyd's The Wall. Brandon, when I send out the link for the next one-on-one Zoom, please join me there and let's take a look at what you're doing and see if we can get you unblocked. This one's for you too, Hanky. Check this out. And shoot, no, I keep forgetting it won't just. Oh, no, 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 no. No. It's a reference to a bird of some kind. If you can see its thing in my dock here. I'm going to go ahead and share that window so you can see it. For some reason, when it's on my high DPI display, the built-in display on my laptop, this app does have pixel size. But now I believe you should be able to see it at its intended resolution. And do you see what this is? Yeah. Yeah. But check this out. I mean, you can see the apple. You can also see this is black and white, like original Macintosh black and white. Because the Apple II way back when was color in 1977, but for some reason the Macintosh wasn't color until 1990. Yeah, the Lisa did have color. But as you can see, this is plainly based on Mac System 6. Copyright System 7. copyright 1993, and this looks like what the Mac looked like in 1993, the ancestor of that prior machine that I showed you, that I added the Unix environment as an application on top of the Mac environment. Here, this is Apple's original Unix. Apple's had two Unixes, the one that is currently shipped inside of Macs, and this is, it's not its ancestor, but here Apple, under contract from a few of its customers in order to try to sell workstations in the early 1990s, made its own Unix and built the Mac environment on top of the AT&T Unix kernel, so that when I do uname-a, you will see that this is AUX. My system is called Artifact. It's version 301, and this is System 5 Release 2. And this, Steve, is a Motorola 68,000 chip here. But yeah, this is really old and super unfriendly Unix. Does it have CC? Yes, it does. But it's Unix. Yeah. And a whopping 16 megabytes of RAM. It looks like, oops, I'm sorry. Is it 64 megabytes or is it 16? Looking at that is kind of confusing. Is it not? But if you think this is unfriendly, you got something coming to you. Yeah. Yeah, so what's the built-in memory if that's total memory? Yep, that was a big machine in 1993. It's funny because the original Mac was only a one-button mouse. You right-click to get out of that application. Those super big diskettes in kilobytes? What do you mean by super big diskettes? Do you mean those hard, not so floppy disks, Miguel? Yes, they did, but this one had an internal hard drive. No, not 8-inch, 160K. You need to get a little older for that. Like, even an Apple II never used 8-inch floppies. Yeah. 5¼ inch, 140 kilobytes. Let's move that here and new share, desktop 1. And let's stop the VM and quit that up. And let's go to the VMware Vault. Oops, not the CentOS. Yep, I did the same thing. How's that, Steve Henke? Does that sound take you back? Once upon a time, I read in all of my floppy disks for my old Apple II, Open Home Image, Apple II, 140K, because I got 800K too. But I've got a few old floppy disks from when I was a kid. No, that's the emulator. I can't take any credit for that. And it's not Unix at all, so I'm not going in there today. But I will, again, in the VMware Vault, show you, here's some museum things. And you can see I give pejorative nicknames to a lot of my machines, especially when they're Windows. But I do not have an OS 390 machine. And this, some of you might recognize, you might have seen it. Oh, there it is. Xenix is a registered trademark of Microsoft Corporation. This is Microsoft's Unix from back in the 80s and early 90s right here in this VM. No, that VM, Brandon, is Windows XP. It was my first Windows machine at home, so it got that name. But this right here in this VM, you'll be able to look up SCO, Xenix, name-A. Yeah, this is Microsoft's former Unix, Xenix. All right, how are we doing on time? Still nobody raising their hands. I hope 27 of you are not bored. But pretty soon here, we will go over to one-on-one time. And I will email out another link. Yes, there are lots of people who do not like SCO for a variety of reasons. The company that currently has the name and the software isn't the same company. Duke Nukem 3D on floppy disks, Mark. All right, still no questions? Anybody want to see any old Unixes? I had Doom on floppy disks way back once. Shut down. There we go. This is a real System 5 that I just shut down, dude. It said System 5 a minute ago. But yeah, I absolutely have a real System 5. Yeah, the MS one, it's System 5. But oh, I've got that Sun VM. I've got a couple Solaris VMs. You all are going to be setting up Solaris. Oh, an AT&T System 5. So you can download them. There are some AT&T distros that have been released as open source now because they're so bloody old. But the closest thing to it is probably going to be something like this. Because right after, I'll be right there, Neil. I'm kind of answering this question, but I'm sure yours is actually less historical. Museums, Unix. You know, I undid the pun. You can see the name of the product here. But when AT&T sold Unix System Labs to Novell, Novell then licensed all the intellectual property to SCO, which is why this product here is the last thing that you will see that actually has Unix as a part of the brand name of it. I think it's still booting, but this is the descendant of, got a box in the garage. That's funny. It's called Univel Unixware. See if I got a picture of it. Univel Unixware. And you can see it comes up with SCO Unixware as a part of the picture. But it makes me tempted to go grab the box out of my garage here. No, indeed, this was not a popular product. I believe Mercedes-Benz, IBM, and McDonald's were big licensees of SCO Unix branded Unix way back when. And these were some of the customers when SCO became everybody's least favorite technology company. It was because they started suing all their users who were using Linux. And then their move was legally akin to saying, stop or I'll shoot. Pretty much that's what SCO did. But yeah. I'm looking at your comment, Neil. No, there's a serial number in the header for the zone file. Increment the serial number in the appropriate zone file. The zone file has a serial number. It is noted there. It was also noted when you first set it up. Oh, and you have your hand raised too. Did I just answer your question, sir?
Yeah, I think what I was, in the zone file itself, not the one at the top of serial one as we started when we made this file to begin with.
Yeah.
You are talking about that one at the top of the file, right?
That's the zone file's serial number, bud.
And it starts with 1, so we need to increment it to 2 when we. I guess my question is, do we always have to increment it, or only after what?
I didn't understand the last part of your question there.
So we don't always have to increment it, correct?
If you change it, you always should. Yes.
You mean change this file?
Yes.
Oh, I see. I gotcha.
Because
right.
if you're replicating it, as you often do to keep a service failed over. See, if we were to make fault tolerant DNS, setting up a second name server that also served up names for CS470.local on your local network, you would configure a replica name server using some words that the entire world is trying to make taboo right now in your named.conf file. And how it knows whether or not to replicate that data is based upon the serial number. Because if
I see.
If they develop a language in the DNS protocol, if you read it, I have serial number X of the zone CS470.local. And if one of the masters has a newer version of that zone file than you have, then you ask to be sent it. Make sense?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
All right, so this is pretty much the closest thing to canonical Unix I've got running, because I couldn't get that other one running. But if there are no questions after Pocky here, I will go get that box and show you so you can see some really ancient software. Pocky, you're up. Next batter.
Hey, Peter, on lab number 1, number 20, am I doing that step under single user mode, or am I supposed to log under, not single user?
Let's say, I don't know, what does it say? But what it says, again, this is a narrative, and you should go back through this lab, because this is I believe the only one that I have you spend significant time in single user mode. Which step number did you say?
20, sir.
20, sir. It doesn't matter.
because once I do man hostname.if, it prompts me up, correct? And then I do etc/hostname.em0. It says cannot execute, permission denied. I don't quite understand.
What are you trying to do? Are you trying to run the file or are you trying to edit it?
I am trying to edit the file.
So what do you run to edit a file?
It's
Do you run the file you're trying to edit the file?
got it. Okay. I'll take a look.
Is etc hostname.em0 an executable piece of code?
No. Wait.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Oh, reading. Got it. Thank you.
Yep. All right. In a few minutes here, because it'd be the halfway point, I'm going to go ahead and, a few minutes. At 8 p.m., I'll turn it over to one-on-one time, and I will go until no people ask any more questions. I'll go offline for a few just to switch the Zoom rooms, start up the new one and let everybody know about it via Blackboard and direct email. And then I'll move over there again at 8 o'clock and start helping people one-on-one. But stand by. I'll be right back with another little museum exhibit here from my garage. Right back. So in case you haven't figured it out yet, I'm a little bit of a, well, I like collectors, like all collectors of some kinds hoard some stuff. And now they're all data as opposed to discs, because you make ISO images out of the CD-ROMs and you never need to pull it out. So all the stuff that I used to have in bookcases are now in racks in my garage where I can't yet bear to throw them out. But you may remember from me talking about it, how AT&T, though it developed Unix, was not able to sell software directly to the consumer. It needed to develop business partners in order to do so. So before AT&T sold the Unix intellectual property in their Unix System Lab subsidiary, when they spun it out, they formed a joint venture with Novell, who's still around today. They're the people behind WordPerfect. You'll also hear them described as Corel. The holding group, the holding company is called the Canopy Group. But they formed Unix System Labs, and Novell formed a joint venture called Univel, as you can see up there. And they released, see, this box actually says it's Unix. I do not have a Banyan Vines. I did not collect any, I only really collected old Unix and old Apple stuff. But this piece of software, Univel Unixware, was the first piece of software branded as Unix that was sold outside of AT&T. And yeah, it's pretty old. I think that's like 1990, 1989 or 1990. But for some reason, it's one of the few OSs that won't install in VMware. I mean, lots of really old things will install in VMware. For instance, I'll show you one more, at least, since we've still got a little while until the halfway point. Shut down dash. But when Steve Jobs got kicked out of Apple, he started a Unix company. Some of you have probably in some history lesson somewhere heard of Next. They made the first cube computer. They made black computers. They made really expensive ones before they got out of the hardware business entirely and just became an operating systems company. And you will notice here in this VM window, the spinning beach ball of Macintosh waiting on your current modern Mac, because this open step here is Next's operating system from before they were bought by Apple, bringing Steve Jobs back to Apple. And this operating system became today what is the current modern Macintosh. In fact, a lot of API calls in the Mac still to this day start with the prefix NS because they come from Next's Next Step API way back when from on this operating system, because this is quite literally the ancestor of the current Mac OS running in a VM under modern Mac OS. And this terminal.app here is the same one as this terminal.app right here. This one right here on my Mac is just the ancestor of this same application. You can see it right down to the device terminal number. Next, I don't know about them being the first multiprocessor on a desktop. And no, this is not X Windows. NextStep had its own windowing environment that was based on PostScript. They called it Display PostScript, and they were very proud of it. When it became Mac OS windowing environment is also not X Windows. Initially, it was modeled on PDF, and they called it Display PDF. Yeah, it looks very much like X Windows, because X Windows you can mostly looks kind of 1990 something still, unless you do it really well, unless you set up your environment really well. But yeah, Next had all these concepts like being able to rip off the menu and move it anywhere. And you can see the dock here. This is right down to the recycling icon. This is the ancestor of the Mac's dock at the bottom of my window. But yeah, this is Mac OS before it was Mac OS. And it's a pain to build software on top of, for instance. It's funny, so Doom, the first web browser, the first web server, and many other notable pieces of software were developed for the first time on a Next. And here's that Doom right there. Yeah, Mosaic was built first on the Next. I actually believe I have Mosaic here. ls-l next apps. No, I have OmniWeb. OmniWeb was another popular web browser for Next. Still no questions, anybody? Any feedback? Anybody bored? Anybody really riveted? Any requests? I said I would go over at 8 p.m. to one-on-one, so I'm gonna hold off and wait until 8 p.m. to go in one-on-one. Roger that, Matt. Thank you for hanging around. Martin Phillip, I see your hand. You're up, sir. But I do not hear you.
Hello? Okay.
Now I hear you.
Cool. We need to edit in order to add the, what's it called? The point, make it point to the OpenPSC .cs47.local. We need to add that into our named master, var / named / master / CS40 470. I'm just confused on which file I need to edit.
Which one makes sense? I'm going to throw the question right back at you, Martin.
Is it the alias, mail alias? Because I have no. I'm able to send email from it to my clients and everything. I just can't get that thing going.
These seem to be apples and oranges.
So the only ones I'm thinking about is anything inside the var named, or yeah.
I asked you to create a name service record, right? That was a part of the ask.
Right. I have that in my cs.local, cs470.local.
So try it there.
Oh, I have that already. I've already set that up, and it's getting the same error.
Did you restart the service?
Yeah, I even like shut down all my virtual machines and according like, how we're supposed to.
You not have needed to do that.
Okay.
You should just need to restart your name service.
Oh, okay, and then I should just work. I should just test it with a cron job.
Or test it manually. People who are having the problem were generally failing to send mail manually. Try to send to an address at your OpenBSD box.
Oh, I've been able to send emails.
If you're not having any problems, then you don't need to go through this step.
Oh, well, because I was just getting that logged message error in my email. I don't know why.
What log error message?
So that's the one that I send it to you that says MX destination. So I'm able to send email, although when I go check my logs in my mail log, I get that error in there.
I get mailed a lot of error messages.
Oh, should I copy it to you?
How about you copy it in the chat?
Yeah, sorry. It's the same one.
Yeah. So if you're still getting this, when you send to at openbsd.cs470.local address, then you still have the problem.
Well, okay, but I can still send email, correct? If I had that problem?
Like I just explained in painstaking detail to Mr. Bissonette, we don't send email from this account. So I'm confused by what you mean.
Like a test.
You need to be more precise if you want help. Sending mail from where to where? From
my OpenBSD to a client. Like I say, I want to do test, echo test. I could do that.
Where's the client? The client, again.
On my the Thunderbird or my Microsoft, I can get like an email from my virtual machine or whatever, like a message to my clients if I do like an echo test. But when I go to check my logs, I get that error.
You are very slightly missing the point and displaying a gap in your thinking, sir.
Okay.
Does your OpenBSD VM speak directly with Thunderbird in any way, shape, or form?
Yes.
No, it doesn't.
Oh. Sorry. Okay. So
who are you sending to from your OpenBSD?
To Martin at cs.local, cs40.local, cs470.local.
Okay, good. That's good that that works. We know we have an MX record for CS470.local, the whole domain. It's the one that I asked you to put in there in the first place when we set it up, so we know where the email went. When you're getting this error, sir, it's because it's saying, hey, wait a minute. This isn't for CS470.local. It's for openbsd.cs470.local. And for some reason, instead of doing the right thing and going to the domains mail exchanger, it's trying to send to itself. And it's not listening because it's not a mail server. We're trying to send it as a client here. When you're one of your VMs is sending an email from a cron job, it's just like it's Thunderbird, your mail client. It's an email client. A mail service running on a system can be set up to be just an SMTP client, or it can be set up to be a server where it accepts inbound mails and is listening for them. We configure your FreeBSD box to do that. It is the outbound SMTP mail host for all of your other VMs. That is precisely what we're setting up in DNS by setting it up as the mail exchanger. You want to send email to users at CS470.local, goes to your FreeBSD box.
So when I send mail, I get like that. What I actually does reach, that's what I get. So it's working, but it's not working.
So the workaround to make sure that it works all the time, man,
Yeah.
is the one that I gave you.
Okay.
And I'm just asking you to do a little thinking to get there, because the question you asked in the first place, we got a long way from it, was what file did we hold? I want you to think about that.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to try stuff, and don't be afraid to break things. But also don't be afraid to back up what you had that was working before you change it. Make sense? I've already showed you how to do that for a reason.
So I'll just look around in the named file, mess around with it.
So that you're clear too, that it's named, it's not that we're not saying named like we named it something. That's not a verb in the past tense. It's named, the name daemon, the name server.
Okay.
Like SSH, you'll see a lot of services that serve things in Unix are daemons, like I think I said in the first lecture. And so you have named, SSHD, inetd, SMTP-D, as in your error message, your log message. Make sense?
Okay.
Just saving you some people looking at you funny the first time you said named outside of class. All right, thank you very much, sir. Dr. Henke, you are the next batter.
Yeah, so the question I have is kind of unrelated, but where did Charlie Root come from?
Oh, I have no idea. That's perfect fodder for a web search. I know what you're talking about. On most BSD Unixes, for instance, it seems to go back a little ways, because I believe OpenBSD has it as well as FreeBSD, right? If you do finger root on OpenBSD, you get Charlie Root. If you do finger root on FreeBSD, you get Charlie Root. I think it's the BSD thing. I have no idea why the root user has a first name of Charlie. Why is root Charlie Root? BSD Unix. Why is root named Charlie? There you go. Goes back farther than BSD apparently solved. Who is Charlie? Somebody will have a version of the story. Is it the real one? That's funny. That's some seriously awkward English there. Oh, it's named for Charles Emery Root. Huh. And there was baseball. So there are lots of versions of the story, as happens when a piece of technology is 50 years old. And the Marshall Kirk McCusick is one here mentioned in this post in my web browser, is like one of the original BSD Unix guys. I think Kirk McCusick is the guy behind SendMail, actually, which you've now set up in lab number 2. Yep, known for BSD Unix, Kirk. Excuse me, Eric Ullman is SendMail, and his dude is Kirk McCusick. And they are both old BSD Unix people. But Kirk McCusick is what this person is saying. Is the person they're saying put it into BSD Unix. Although the person up above said it was the traditional owner since 1970 of the root account on Unix systems. It has nothing to do with GNOME. But actually link. Hanky, do you still have a question? Your hand is still raised.
Nope, that was it. Oh, I got to turn it. I got to remove it.
I got you. Cool. Matt Woodruff, you're up, bud.
Hello, Professor. So I had a question regarding step 19, where we make we use the make file to make FreeBSD. Step 19, where you use
number 2.
Lab number 2, yeah. Where you do sudo make freebsd.cf, and I'm getting an error where it can't find a file in a directory, and it references local_procmail, but I see that it's in a single quote, and so I've tried taking it out of the single quote when we edit it into the freebsd.mc, and I don't get that error code anymore. So I'm just curious if that's expected.
No, it's not at all expected. You probably made a mistake transcribing what I put in there in the prior step, where we're adding options for local mailers, or we're changing around the mailer options for SendMail before we.
Yeah, so.
Those,
yeah, so.
Go ahead.
So where we inserted those 3 lines above mailer local in the freebsd.mc file itself, is that what you're referring to?
Yep.
So I've been going over that for a little bit, and I tried it without the quotation marks, and it took the error away, so I wasn't getting it, but it appears every time I type those commands in verbatim.
You are not typing them in verbatim, I promise you, else they would be working. If you will note, just by looking at it, that this piece of punctuation is not the same as this one. Do you see that?
I do see that. How would I go about changing? I guess I saw this Google search.
That's not a yes, indeed.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Few people get stuck there. It's Hanky, I presume your hand is up again. Speak and be heard. Mr. Hanky. Going once. Going twice. All right, Hockey, I see your hand is up. You're free to speak, sir.
Hey, Peter. I just emailed you mistake I did. I press exit out of OpenBSD. Does that mean I start over?
No.
No. Okay. All right. It just popped back up. All right. It just took a while.
It means you log back in, dude.
All right. Thanks. It just took a long while. I'm like, what's happening?
If you log out of your Windows box after you do some stuff on it, do you have to do it over again?
So I don't understand what processes are being saved and what is like what part of the machine's like saving the data and what's starting over is my question.
Don't worry, you'll get it eventually. Just keep doing it in the meantime and web searching.
Okay.
Some things edit files. I have you run a text editor. I told you about a text editor. We talk about saving a file. You know about saving files, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get that concept?
Yes, sir.
We do that sometimes, and it is persistent.
Okay.
Whenever you write changes to a file to disk, they are persistent, right?
Yes, sir. Okay.
I want you to, so I'm giving you an overall understanding of what you're doing, but I'm not articulating precisely what each piece does, because although I'm showing you the big picture, I want you to start to understand what I'm asking you to do with each piece. Because if I spoon feed that to you, you're never going to get it on your own. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm. I think I'm just still timid at this type of stuff.
Don't be. That is all the more reason why I cannot spoon feed you. Do not be timid. Do not be afraid to break things. These are virtual machines. Yes, if you screw up the virtual machine completely and it will not reboot, then you get to start the lab.
I don't know that threshold. I guess that's what I'm at.
You will know for sure when you get there. I mean, if you just make an errant edit to a file, you can just restore it. Again, one of the first things I showed you how to do is how to make copies of files. If you're feeling timid about making changes about stuff you're new to, don't worry. Needless to say, lots of different people feel that way and have that experience. But don't hesitate to go ahead and make a backup copy of everything you are about to edit before you edit it.
Okay.
So that you can go back.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes. Okay.
Don't be afraid to break it. That's why we have VMs. If you break it, you may lose some hours of work, but those lessons that hurt the worst, you learn the most from. And there's no substitute for that sort of learning, even in my past. I learned the most valuable lessons ever after it cost me entire weekends sometimes. Because you have to have the pain associated with that.
Okay.
If I keep spoon feeding you what precisely you're doing, you're going to learn to be dependent on spoon feeding.
Or mimic.
Yeah, so I want you to, that feeling of confidence, getting over that timidity. I've talked about that confidence and why I put OpenBSD first to give you the most pain out the gate, because I wanted you to feel that confidence here during the class. I know with trying new things is tough, but the only way that you get there to the promised land of feeling comfortable with this stuff is on your own.
Okay.
To a certain degree. I'm not going to leave you totally abandoned for these 6 weeks, but you asked me here a very general question, and if I can paraphrase, you're asking me, how do I know what exactly I'm doing over this? I've advertised some goals. I do kind of explain exactly what we're doing in each step to a certain degree. Just just work with me here, man. And I promise, if you keep fiddling with it, if you keep messing with it, and you keep reminding yourself that you have little to lose here on your own virtual machines, you will stop being afraid eventually. I promise.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Hanky, do you have another question? Feel free to unmute. What have you been stuck on, Miguel Aquino? Okay, cool. Thank you, Hanky. Aquino, what have you been stuck on for a while? On errata? On that Lab 2 errata that I just posted, the MX record for the OpenBSD box? You don't owe me an apology. No apologies necessary. If you're stuck on it, that's what learning feels like, right? Once you see it, once you figure it out, you're gonna go, oh my God, I get it now. And that feeling is precious. If I spoon feed you that, it just takes away all of the eureka and all of the magic from that. So again, I'm sorry I don't just give it to you, but I want you to really learn. And to learn again that you can find it. So it is now 8:02 p.m. I am going to kill the recorded part of tonight, and I'm going to send all of you via Blackboard a link to a different Zoom room where the waiting room is going to be turned on. And if you want one-on-one support from me, I will help you all, but let's take an intermission of like, let's say I'll have that out by 8:15 for those of you listening. Everybody, absolutely everybody is going to get the email with the link, but I'll be available for one-on-one starting in at 8:15. And yes, Miguel, if you can't get email working, you better believe that that is one of the things that I'm going to be grading you on, is are you getting email from your other VMs? Plus, you want it to work, right? Right? All right, everybody. See you either on Wednesday or here in a few minutes in the waiting room.